Hello, everyone. Welcome to Wine, Women, and Words. I am Michelle, and with me, of course, is Diana.
Hello.
And tonight we are having our Book of the Month discussion, which means we have Kelly O'Connor McNees, author of Undiscovered Country, joining us this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, Kelly. We're so excited to have you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. We've been dissecting and analyzing and discussing the book all month. So I know Diana and I are both really excited to get into it.
Mm-hmm.
Before we do, though, we have a few Wine, Women, and Words announcements. So Diana, would you like to
I get to make the announcement? Yay! Well, really, really exciting news. Wine, Women, and Words now has merchandise. So, yay! So you guys can totally celebrate your Wine, Women, and Words love and your book love with mugs. We've got a travel mug and a regular mug. I don't have them with me to show to our YouTube watchers because my samples haven't come in yet. But we also have tote bags so you can carry around all your books. So like your book of the month, it'll fit perfectly. So you could buy all the books that our authors feature. And then we also have some shirts, some sweatshirts, everything you need to show your love for books on there. So go check it out. Go to our website, winewomenandwordspodcast.com, and there'll be a link there to our Etsy shop. And if you're a Patreon subscriber, $10 and up, you get 10% off at the shop.
Mm-hmm. I'm really excited. I am also just really tired.
You look tired. You've had the worst travel schedule for the last week.
It's been a little hectic, which is why I was so grateful, Kelly, when you emailed me and asked if we could reschedule, because I'm over here planning the show and making my travel arrangements. And all of a sudden, when you emailed me, I looked at the calendar and went, oh my God, I'm flying on the 27th. So
were you traveling for work or?
I went to Arizona for one of my best friend's weddings. I was one of her bridesmaids.
Oh, so you had to be there.
So I definitely had to be there. And it was one of those awesome short trips where you get zero sleep. So you come back from your trip more exhausted than you were when you left.
Yes.
But for very good reasons. So.
And also specify that before you went to Chicago, you drove to your mom's in North Carolina.
Oh.
And then you flew from North Carolina to Arizona. Then you're in North Carolina now. And then you still have to make it back to Chicago. And when's that trip going to happen?
We're driving back Friday or Saturday. We haven't decided yet. We had to drop off the kids in North Carolina. So we got an child-free weekend. It was
really important when you're going to the wedding.
Yes.
I had a child-free bed to myself for like 2 nights, and I didn't know what to do with myself.
Like all this space. What do I do?
Oh, I took all the pillows. There were like 4 or 5 pillows, and I put them all around me. It was like sleeping on a cloud.
Oh.
No little feet in your face.
Nope. Glorious. So, being the hot mess that I am right now, I am foregoing wine because I'm pretty sure I might have caught a bug on the plane because I woke up feeling a little under the weather. So, Diana, you and Kelly might be carrying the team, or you might be carrying the team. I don't know.
I have a little glass of something.
You're not going.
This is not a Sancerre. Am I supposed to say what it is?
You could say you tell us what type it is.
Yeah, I think it's Sancerre or something related to that. My husband got me a Wine of the Month club for anniversary present last month, and this was my first. You get 1 bottle of red and 1 bottle of white. It's a store in our neighborhood that does it.
Oh, neat.
So this is one I've never had before, but I really like it. And he got me those pure filters. Do you know about those?
Yes.
Because I have bad allergies and I really have a hard time drinking red. But I like it, but I get really like flushed and congested from it. And so this is my first time trying these filters and they really do work.
Oh, how neat.
Unsolicited plug for the pure filter.
Yes, maybe we should have them for advertising for the show.
Honestly, a lot of people like red but have a problem drinking it.
Yeah, the allergies, you get that from the tannins in the wine, and some people will be like, oh, I can drink white wine, but I can't drink red wine, and that's because the red wine has more tannins, because that's what gives it its color.
Yeah, and also histamines, I guess, is part of what gets filtered out with this filter. So it's a huge difference to what it usually is like for me to drink red. So I'm happy.
Oh, very cool. Well, I'm drinking a red as well. I'm drinking a red blend. But I'm not drinking from our usual sponsor. I haven't opened up one of those bottles yet, and I need to. But I was like, I got to finish some of the bottles that I opened because I can only have so many open bottles of wine lining up my kitchen counter at a time.
Yes.
But for those of you who are listening who want to try out one of the Winc wines, just go to trywinc.com/www podcast, and you can get $22 off your first order of wine.
Very good.
Yes. So this month, Undiscovered Country, there are some books that you can go research happy while you're reading, and I was totally in my element. I mean, first of all, I am a new hardcore fan of Lorena Hickok. As I'm a freelance journalist also, or myself, so I was like, oh, it's my people.
Absolutely.
Anytime we read a book about a journalist, it's like, it's my tribe. I love it.
Yes.
So what initially drew you to the story? How did you hear about the letters and this relationship?
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with my editor at the time, who ended up not being the editor on this book, but we were talking about, next projects and what might be interesting, because I had written before, I had written about Louisa May Alcott for my first novel. And then I had two other novels that were about historical time periods, but fictional people in those periods. And, publishers sometimes would prefer to have you write about a real historical figure just from a marketing standpoint, because it can be easier to connect with readers, to find, a name that people already know. So we were just sort of talking about ideas, and I had, different story ideas. And she said, have you ever thought about writing about Eleanor Roosevelt? And I said, my first instinct was, of course I love her and admire her and knew a lot about her, but I felt like everything that you could say about her had already been said. And with historical fiction, you really need there to be sort of a space where you can create a story. With my first novel, Lost Summer of Louisa May Alcott, there is a summer missing from her journals in 1855. And we sort of know where she was in July, and we know where she was in November. And her life kind of changed dramatically during that time, but we don't really know what could have caused that, if anything happened during that period of time, and why didn't she write about it, and were there pages missing? And, so that was a really great space to create fiction. And I didn't think that would be true for Eleanor Roosevelt, since it seemed like she's just so exhaustively covered in biographies and films, and we know where she was at all times, throughout her entire career. But I thought, well, it is interesting. I was interested in the New Deal time period, so I would read about her. So I went through and read some of her biographies, and I did come across a chapter about Lorena Hickok and about these letters and about the nature of their relationship. And I had never heard of her. And that was very intriguing to me, because she was sort of like a footnote in the story. And I often find really great ideas for fiction in the footnotes of history. And so I thought, well, if I've never heard of her, I wonder if a lot of other people haven't heard of her either. And I wonder if there could be a story here. So then I really started to go down the Hick rabbit hole and learn everything I could about her. and her life and her background. And I just found her story so compelling, that she came from such a difficult childhood. And I too was really interested in the journalism aspect and what it was like to be kind of a, journeyman reporter and working your way up at that time, and kind of going from the small town papers up the ladder, and what that was like as a woman. And she was just a great character. So that was sort of how I locked in. And then the process was figuring out, was I really going to tell the whole book from her point of view? Was I going to go back and forth between the two of them? What time period? Because you could have written it to cover decades, so what was the scope going to be? And those were some of the questions that took a lot longer to figure out. But just finding out about her, and I could just hear her voice in my head. So that was the initial spark.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, and I really found myself sympathizing with her, because she had, I didn't feel as bad for Eleanor. I mean, even though they were both in this kind of impossible situation where they couldn't be with the person that they really wanted to be with, I really, for whatever reason, I just didn't connect with Eleanor as much, but I did sympathize with Hick a lot more. Maybe just because I was like, well, you're a reporter, so I'm on your side. But, just to know how much she overcame to build her career. I mean, that was a really male-dominated field at the time. So I can only imagine what she had to do to earn their respect and be treated like a reporter, even though, they did have her covering, what kind of shoes is the first lady wearing today, or, so she still had to deal with that. But I definitely read this book as kind of her story and saw it through her eyes. And what made you decide to just tell it from her perspective rather than doing the back and forth?
Yeah, I mean, I really experimented with a lot of different approaches to the story, but ultimately, I kept running into the same problems that I mentioned before, where trying to find sort of a fictionalized voice for Eleanor Roosevelt was just really hard, because we have so much of her voice, her real voice, in the historical record. And I'm sure, maybe a better writer than I could have done it, but I found myself just really loving getting to be in Hick's head, and then sort of not feeling as able to connect with Eleanor. And I think over time, I just realized that I really did want this to be Hick's story, which was not a great decision from a publishing standpoint, and made it harder to get this book published, honestly, because I think because Eleanor is so well known and people love her and adore her, they wanted it to be more her story. But I thought Hick deserved her own book.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think she absolutely did. It was kind of difficult to see in the research or when we did our own, fell down the rabbit hole or the Hick hole for the research, how Hick ended up just getting this raw deal when it all came to an end, where she was perceived as being this clingy person to Eleanor, we were traumatized by the fact that her ashes, or she was buried in a pauper's grave. Nobody claimed her remains. And it was in an unmarked grave. I think it's still an unmarked grave.
Now they have raised money, but this is just within the last 5 years for a marker now.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Cemetery. But yes, that was devastating to learn about that, especially after I had loved her and, come to just be with her for so many years. That was devastating to learn that.
I feel that after reading your book, I think Lorena deserves a spot in LGBT history and the LGBT history books, mm-hmm. right alongside Eleanor, just beyond just for her reporting and then her humanitarian work, but also what she had to put up with being a closeted lesbian. What were your thoughts on building that relationship between the two of them?
Yeah, I mean, it was something I thought a lot about because, of course, and sometimes people, feel uncomfortable about the level of speculation that you have to do with a book like this because, of course, we have these letters and we know we can speculate from them what the nature of this relationship was, but we don't know. Only the two people who are in the relationship know exactly what went on and what they said to each other behind closed doors and what else happened behind closed doors. And so I really thought a lot about, how far did I want to go? How much did I want to depict? How far out on that limb was I willing to go? And honestly, it was really important to me not to sensationalize or, sort of turn it into a what did they do, what happened between them, because A, there's no way to know, and B, it's not that interesting compared to the impact that they had on each other's lives. To me, that was so much more interesting that whatever happened here, Hick really changed Eleanor's life and the trajectory of her role as First Lady. I mean, she had a huge impact on how Eleanor's image was created in the media. So I wrestled a lot with how many liberties I could take. And I had to kind of come to peace with, knowing that some people might not approve of that, and that was just the way it was going to be. But I always tried to focus on thinking about, what drew them to each other, what was the source of this intense connection that they had.
Absolutely. And speaking of those letters, you feature letters in the book. Are those the actual letters between Lorena and Eleanor? No.
They're fictionalized versions, but they're very much inspired by the real ones. So there aren't any letters in my novel that are wildly, different from the kinds of letters that are in the correspondence between them. I couldn't use the real ones without permission, and I also didn't really want to because I wanted to be able to have the freedom to kind of shape them for the story, the purpose.
I can totally understand that. And those are some sensational letters. So the letters that are in the book are very similar to what they actually corresponded with each other with.
Yes.
And that was
they wrote those things down and they didn't think, what if someone finds these? Especially Eleanor. She was very brazen about it.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if her brazenness came from the fact that her husband was having an affair himself, and she wanted her freedom, and this is the way she got her freedom.
I think so. I think she had reached a point of just had to be herself, couldn't try to live under the thumb of all these expectations. I mean, I'm sure she had her moments of doubt and, pulling back and trying to fit back into the mold again, but I think overall she just had a lot of courage to live her life her way. And she had spent a lot of years, she wasn't a young woman at this point. So she had spent a lot of years sort of fulfilling all those traditional roles as mother and wife and all the obligations of being a wealthy, prominent family name and all of that. And I think she just had no fucks left to give at a certain
I love that you said that because I was thinking that and I was like, I've got to work that in somehow. And that is so very true. Eleanor Roosevelt had no fucks left to give.
And isn't it inspiring? I mean, I find that very inspiring. Just you reach a point in life where it's too exhausting to try to pretend that you're something else anymore. So
absolutely. I absolutely love it. And I think, learning about Lorena in conjunction with Eleanor, I feel to me makes Eleanor much more of a feminist icon than she was before to me. This gives her more depth. It gives her more bravado, I guess you could say.
I mean, that's how I see her. And of course, there's always a danger in, not acknowledging that the novel is a fiction, my fictional version of Eleanor. So it's coming through a few lenses before it reaches the reader. But that is how I see her. And I think that it really enriches our understanding of her. She becomes more of a human being instead of just this icon that's on coffee mugs and, all of these things. I mean, she's really become commodified and sort of remote from us. And so we forget that she really was a human and not perfect. And, there were lots of things that are problematic about her in certain ways. And but I think that understanding that she had this love and that it really affected her life just humanizes her a lot.
And I think it's really interesting. While I started researching, how the letters became public, and I was actually searching the Chicago Tribune archives for any mention I could find of Hick and Eleanor together, and I found a bunch of articles about the letters once they were public. And I think it's really interesting that so many people were very reluctant to kind of comment on their relationship, that it was a friendship. And Diana and I were talking about it before, and like, I love Diana, but I do not send her the text messages that Hick and Eleanor sent each other.
And for the record, I'm greatly disappointed by this. I feel so let down by my work wife.
Like, my good night texts, if I do send one, is, well, I'm tired, I'm going to go pass out, I'll text you in the morning.
Right.
And most of the time it's, oh, next morning, oh, hey, sorry, I totally passed out and forgot to text you back. It is not so much, it is your face I will be dreaming of type thing.
Yeah, I know.
So,
yeah.
People were very reluctant and very freaked out about it. And I don't know how much information, I'm trying to remember what all was in the author's note, but Doris Faber, who was writing a biography of Lorena Hickok, went into the archive, the Roosevelt Archive, in 1978, so the year that these could finally be released, because it was sealed for 10 years after Hick's death. And she was really expecting to find professional correspondence between them, and personal, because it was known that they were friends, but nothing beyond that. And so when she opened this up to see all of these really romantic letters, and I think it's really interesting because everyone who was there understood right away what it was. It's not like they were, unsure or whatever, but then immediately went into kind of damage control mode. Like, how can we talk about this in the press? And to be fair to them at the time, they were probably thinking we have to protect Eleanor's reputation.
Because this was 1978, so
she had died. She had died in 1963, but still, she was like the most iconic woman of the 20th century so far. And so you can't really underestimate what a big deal this was for people who admired her, to square the fact that she maybe had this affair or proclivity for women or whatever, with all the things that people admired about her. And the homophobia was just so ingrained in everything that people just found that you couldn't, those two things couldn't be true in the same person. And so,
because I don't think we started to actually accept homosexuality as being an okay thing within society until the 1980s. So it's still very recent.
People, I mean, look, even now, it depends on where you are, but it's a very, very new thing. And it's hard for us now to put ourselves in that mindset. So I'm hard on Doris Faber, because then she went on to write the biography of Lorena Hickok and really straight-washed, is the term, the whole nature of the relationship, and sort of like twisted herself in knots to explain away all of these things, that they had this kind of Victorian style friendship, and that, that it was not romantic. It seems like it is pointing that way, but here's why that's not what it actually is. And so that was unfortunate, because she didn't really tell the story of Hick's life.
You know what I learned about Eleanor being possibly gay? On a scene in Wedding Crashers, they make reference to it.
I think I know what you're talking about.
The really racist old grandma makes a joke about it. And I just remember that thinking, okay, this must be common knowledge that I just wasn't aware of. And it wasn't until your book is the second book I've come across that deals with the relationship, where people are actually starting to explore that now.
More attention.
Yeah. Now, did those other books ever play any role in your mind, or did you just block all of those other ones out?
Are you talking about the Amy Bloom novel?
Yes.
Okay. So I had no clue that book was moving into the world parallel to mine. And in fact, it was just a couple of months before my pub date. So after everything was already done and in and, typeset and everything, that we learned that book was coming out, which is very unusual because typically publishers are very aware of any competing titles. But that book had a strange origin, which is that when it sold as nonfiction. She was going to write a biography of them. But then someone else wrote a biography of them, Susan Quinn, and that book came out, I think, in 2016. So I don't know this because I don't know Amy Bloom and I've never talked to her, but I think what happened is that she got scooped for the project she wanted to do, and so she decided to turn it into a novel, but then didn't tell anyone. And so, I mean, I could be totally wrong about that, but that's the only explanation I can think of for why no one knew in my publisher that this book was coming out. Anyway, so it was a surprise, and not a great surprise when you've been, working on something for years and years. And but in the end, I think it's been really interesting. We had a review together in the New York Times, which was a wonderful thing to have. And our books are really different. They kind of they have different takes on certain things. And I think it's just sort of added to the conversation. So I've come around to not being, at first it was a shock to hear there was another book on the same topic, but I think it's interesting how two people can take the same material and come up with a very different story.
Absolutely. It's like our friend, Erin Lindsay McCabe always says there's room for all kinds of stories. Just because somebody put out a book similar to yours doesn't mean yours can't come out and be told as well.
Yeah, because your take on it will be your take. And so it's been really interesting. Actually, I think it's just made more people talk about Hick. So that's a good thing.
No, sorry, I'm checking my list. I got so into the conversation, I was like, oh, I need to have a question lined up, and I don't.
And I was quiet for a moment because I was like, okay, I don't want to crowd out Michelle.
No, it's totally fine. I just, the blonde moment, pause.
When I audit the show, I'll put on hold music for you if that helps. Maybe.
And I read at the end in your author's notes, one of the characters that really stood out for me was Ruth Johnson and her family. And I guess I should be relieved that she wasn't real, because I was reading that scene in Scott's Run in the airport, and I had just, left my babies and said goodbye to them. And I was reading about these poor kids in these awful conditions. And I was like, I think I need to put it down for a second. I don't think I can read that. But you did mention that she was based on a woman that Hick did know. What were the similarities between those two, the fictional character and the real person?
Yeah, so I think what I said was that she was sort of based on a few of the different people that Hick encountered. So that's a good question. At a certain point, you sort of lose touch with the differences between the real story and the theory that you're creating. So I'm trying to think back. I would say Hick did not get to know any of those people as well as she gets to know Ruth in the story, just because of logistics of not being able to spend as much time together. And there wasn't correspondence between Hick and anyone from Arthurdale, but I needed there to be a way for them to kind of stay linked even after she left and to go on to the next town. And I was just very haunted by the details and I did not exaggerate any of the details of those people's lives. I mean, the sickness and the conditions that they were living in was all in Hick's report. And it really was shocking. Even in the midst of all this shocking deprivation of the Depression, it was really another level of deprivation that they were living with. And I knew that very early on, I knew that had to be in the book. But it took me a really long time to figure out how to have the story of Arthur Dale and the story of their relationship and have it worked all as one story. For a long time, the book was sort of like two books smashed together. So it took a lot of revision to figure out, what were the themes that kind of linked Hick's interest in Arthur Dale and her interest in Eleanor, and what drew them together.
Well, you almost forget for a moment. I mean, even though you obviously know the time period and what FDR was coming into and what he had to deal with, so you know that it's going on. But while you're reading the story and you're reading about Eleanor and Hick and their relationship, you can kind of almost forget that, the country was in ruins at that point. So that was kind of like a smack in the face to like a reality check.
Yeah.
To bring the reader back to what was going on in the real world beyond like their bubble.
Well, and when you're in love, new love, I mean, that's what happens. You just become completely focused on the relationship. And then it is kind of like a slap to realize, when you snap out of it a little bit or things cool off a little bit and you realize that, especially in their case, they really had a responsibility to other people besides themselves. So, yeah.
And I think it's funny that ironic that as much as Eleanor really did not want to be a first lady, she was the only first lady that served that role for 3 terms.
I know.
She was stuck in it for so long.
Yeah, I think she came to sort of find her way with it, and part of that, I think that is part of why things cooled off between them, because in the beginning she really needed Hick. She really relied on her and was miserable and leaned on her, and Hick was the only one she could really tell the truth to. But then she sort of came into her own and she sort of realized, oh, I can use this position to accomplish a lot of the goals for the projects that I care about and the causes that I care about. And as she kind of gained confidence in that role, it was like she needed Hick less. And maybe even Hick was like a reminder of that earlier period that she wanted to move on from. So, and when you think about how she went on after FDR died to have a lot of influence in the world. And so I think eventually she became more comfortable being a public figure.
Yeah, you go, Diana.
Oh, me? We are so off our rhythm tonight. What were there any pieces of information in your research that you found to be really interesting that just kind of took you back?
I mean, I was very shocked the first time I realized that they really did go on this vacation together, totally alone, without Secret Service, without any media following them. That is just really hard to wrap your head around as a person living in 2018, that a figure that was so famous could have that kind of privacy. Mm-hmm. And the fact that Hick lived in the White House, that was another one that I thought, if I put this in, no one's going to believe it. But it's like things that are the hardest to believe are the ones that are true. I definitely would not have made that up. It's just, you can't believe that's real. But she did live there.
It's so crazy. And to think that they had this sorted just family relationship where she had her partner, he had his, they had the kids, and everything was just kind of this weird, strange, normal. And they kept it all quiet. That was just so strange. And you brought up the Secret Service. Do we know how much they actually knew about this relationship?
We don't. So one of the things, that I did take liberty with is the scene where Marcus comes in the room when they're there. I don't know. I don't have any reason to think that actually happened. Although on the other hand, there's no reason to think it didn't. Mm-hmm. I mean, we certainly would have had Secret Service waiting outside the building. So it's plausible that could have happened. And who knows? I mean, think about even now or in any administration, like Secret Service agents must see all kinds of stuff, and it's part of their job that they can never tell, But imagine the things they've seen.
I kind of don't want to imagine the stuff they're seeing right now.
Not right now. I can't even go down that path. But I mean, even just benign things, but seeing the president when he's like, if he gets the flu, like the stomach flu or whatever, and he, I mean, there's just a lot of, they're present for their personal lives, everything all the time. So I'm sure they see a lot of like marital disputes and, children behaving badly and all kinds of stuff. So.
And they just have to keep a straight face and not say anything.
Right. Protect the privacy and just pretend like they don't react to anything. So
I would be terrible at not reacting.
I know.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I'd be like,
oh, I know.
Like, oh no, you didn't.
I mean, I could not give my opinion when it came to like if something was going on. I'd be like, excuse me, no. This, no.
On this.
But that whole dinner scene when Hick came to the White House and it was her and Nora and then Missy, and like Missy, I have to give her some props because we can't hate her because Hick is basically the same thing for Eleanor, but like Missy has had some guts to just like show up and have dinner like she was a normal fixture there.
Well, and it's complicated when you read about them because she and Eleanor had a kind of a close friendship in a way, and Eleanor really did accept that she was like a part of the family. But then there were sort of like hints that there was tension there. So that's kind of what I was playing off of with that scene. Like there had to be, territorial kind of stuff where it felt like she was stepping on Eleanor's toes, and even as accepting as Eleanor was, there had to be a limit to that. So I just thought that was interesting to explore that in a scene where there was a lot of tension in that room
to begin with.
Right. And then I realized like no one knows what's going on between us, and no one even cares because that's how little I matter to these people. Almost being jealous that they weren't causing more of a stir, the way that FDR and Missy were.
And did Eleanor really make her house staff, her cook, cut back and cook with only the ingredients that the people would have had available to them?
And it was a huge scandal. I mean, people who were coming to the White House it was sort of known that you should eat first before you go to the state dinner because the food was going to be so terrible. And that cook, they really had that same cook. I'm trying to remember her name. Henrietta Nesbitt, I think was her name, for years and years. There was actually a piece about it in the New Yorker a few years ago that's hilarious. I think it was in Talk of the Town. And it was just a hilarious look at like the gossip at that time of just how terrible the food was at the White House.
That poor woman, like she probably wanted to cook some amazing meals.
Right. And wanting to be frugal and, live according to the values that they were telling everyone else, because a big thing during the Depression was like, well, we all have to pull together and get by with less and stuff like that. And of course, the Roosevelts had so much money that they were never really affected by it. But what good does it do for the leaders to be saying all these things and then not having to live that way themselves, which again, from where we are sitting in this moment in history, it's kind of hard to imagine the level of integrity that was on display there.
I can't imagine any president within my lifetime doing that.
Right.
When it came down to it, that we're going to live this way and we're going to eat this way. We're going to live like the average American family lives. If they can only afford, this is the average amount that they can afford to eat. This is what they're going to eat. This is what we're going to serve to everybody. And we're going to be a constant reminder of how much poverty there is in our country right now.
Right.
You're not going to see that.
No. And she did really do that thing where she got up on stage at the opera and asked for donations. I mean, she was doing stuff like that all the time. And, you know, some of it was a stunt. Like, I'm sure they had lots of lobster dinners and things in the White House too, when behind closed doors. I mean, some of it was for the optics, but still the fact that she even brought that into the conversation, because everyone saw the Roosevelts as like royalty. I mean, they came from a family that was beyond wealthy, old money, and no one would have expected them to live like regular people. That it was just endless fascination that she wore regular clothes that you could buy at the department store, and you know, people just. I mean, remember when Michelle Obama wore the J. Crew dress and everyone freaked out?
Yes.
It's like a little, you know, that was just a small version of what it was like with Eleanor. So.
And do you know, I mean, I believe I read Hick first turned the letters over to Eleanor's daughter, Anna.
Well, actually, Anna, I don't know about that. That's possible that they went to Anna first and then they went to the archive. That's possible. I would have to go back and look at the chronology of it. I know that Hick and Anna had a conversation where Anna asked, you know, what letters was this a comprehensive, you know, collection? And that Hick said no, that she had destroyed some of Eleanor's letters because Eleanor wasn't always so discreet when she wrote to Hick. Which to me was like, what was in those letters? You know, for imagining, you know, what was destroyed.
Yeah, I think I remember reading that she told her that she had taken letters out to protect Eleanor's reputation. Did the Roosevelts maintain any kind of relationship with Hick?
You know, not really. I mean, she was kind of out once. Eleanor died in 1963 and Hick died in 1968. So for those last 5 years, that's when she really declined. I think her health declined, but also she didn't really have much of an income. And I think Eleanor had been taking care of her financially somewhat. And maybe that dried up after Eleanor died because there wasn't really anybody else to carry that on. I read somewhere that, you know, Hick was sort of seen as like the crazy bag lady around town who would go around telling stories about how she knew Eleanor Roosevelt, and no one believed her.
So sad.
It's really, really sad. And it just makes me wonder, I mean, if she had never donated those letters, we probably wouldn't even know about her, that she even existed. I mean, we would know she existed from the journalism work, but we would have no clue of the impact that she had, and no one would have done more research on her, you know, if it wasn't for these letters. So there would be so much that we don't know, and that just makes me think, what else do we not know, you know, about all kinds of things in history because there wasn't a record of it. So Hick knew it was important for those to be preserved. She wanted to be remembered. She wanted it to be known that she played an important role. That's what I think.
Oh, I agree. And I mean, especially for all the times like you mentioned before that, you know, no one would have suspected them because it was such an outrageous idea that, you know, that they wouldn't have had to worry.
Right.
So she probably just wanted someone to know and someone to care that happened.
It was here, you know. Yeah.
Hold on. Oh my gosh, we are so off our rhythm tonight, Diana.
I'm sorry. We're not on our usual night, so I'm just off. I think that's actually all the questions that I have.
Well, I know I have one more. Now, of course, like as a cliche, this is not my final question, but as a cliche question, you know, just researching Eleanor Roosevelt and getting to know her kind of more beyond, you know, the big ticket items that, you know, everyone knows her for. Was there anything about her that you learned that made you admire her even more than you did prior to this?
Yes. I think I was surprised. Maybe it's just the cynicism of this age that we're in now, where you don't think that anyone's doing anything because they really believe in it. It's always about their image or their brand or whatever. And so I think you would see examples again and again of her truly caring about what happened to these people. So with Arthur Dale, and it happened the way that it is in the novel, where Hick went there, toured, and she typed up this report and sent it, and then she called Eleanor from her hotel room, and Eleanor got in her car and drove herself, many hours to get there as soon as possible to see it for herself. And no one knew she was the first lady. And she went on the tour of this place, and she wanted to gather as much information as she could, because she was already thinking about what can we do to help these people. And there was nothing really politically advantageous about, putting all of her effort into that project, because these were not people with any power. It was not a really savvy move to get so obsessed with this project. But and also she could have gone and done like a photo op and been like, oh, isn't this so sad? And then went back to her life and never done anything about it. But she really was the one pushing that through, advocating to her husband so that he would go to Congress and ask for the funding, seeing it through all the construction, everything that went wrong because they tried to save money, and like the houses didn't fit the foundations, and any place along the way she could have quit and just said, well, we tried, but this is too hard. But she saw that through for years and years. And she continued to go visit that town every year. And I mean, the people that lived in those homes, she was like a god to them. She had totally changed their lives. So I just thought that was amazing. She also was really on the forefront of a lot of issues, anti-lynching laws, like in the 30s, before any white people were talking about that. In white people who were in positions of power. And it was such a horrendous thing. And any of the leaders in the African-American community could not get white politicians to pay attention to it or to speak out against it. And she was advocating. She was a member of the NAACP, probably the only white member of the NAACP in the 1930s. I mean, so she was never afraid to take a stand and let the chips fall where they may. She wasn't always looking to see what was the popular position to take before she decided what she thought about something. And God, we could use some of that right now.
And have you ever thought about writing kind of a sequel to their story? I mean, it ends kind of really at the beginning of their relationship, where they still don't know what's going to happen. So, and there's, 3 decades after that left to the story.
I don't know. I have not really thought about that. Part of it was so hard to figure out what part of the story I wanted to tell. And I'm not sure, I feel like thematically I was able to tell all of what I wanted to tell. So I don't know what sort of new questions would be there for me to pursue it further. But I will say it's been really hard to move on from Hick and get going on a new book, because I just spent so much time with her. And it's you need to have that feeling of like falling in love with the story. And it's taken me a while to kind of figure out what I want to do next because of that. Like dating, you break up and then you need like a rebound before you get into another relationship.
That's a great way to describe novel writing.
It is a relationship. It really is. Because you're with these fictional people for a lot of time, and they live in your head and for years. So it has to be a good fit.
Well, I hope you get through the rebound stage and are able to find a new fictional partner for the next story. And I do think our time is just about up. So thank you so much, Kelly, for joining us. We had so much fun chatting with you and learning more about Eleanor and Lorena and your thought process behind the whole story.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been really fun.
Absolutely. And everyone else, I know it's Tuesday and it's really strange that we're on, but we will be back again on Thursday. So day after tomorrow on our usual time. So be sure to come back for another episode this week. You get 2 episodes of us.
You guys are especially lucky this week.
So everyone else, have a great week. We'll announce our November book of the month on Thursday.
All right.
All right.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.